Hello again and welcome to the second section on Datasheet View in our course on Access 2013 Advanced. In this section we're going to look at the display in Datasheet View and how we can control that, and we're going to look at some of the more advanced aspects of sorting and filtering. Now there is a set of default settings in the Access options which determine the default settings for Datasheet View. So on the Datasheet page there, grid lines and cell effects, default grid lines showing horizontal and vertical. We have a cell effect, the default column width and the font size and the weight and so on. Let's make a couple of changes to that. If I were to take out the grid lines, change the cell effect to raised, the point size to say 16 and say italic, and we'll have bold as well. There we are, nice set of settings there. Click on OK. Then I would need to reopen this particular table in Datasheet View. So let me close the orders table, open it up again, and that looks pretty terrific, doesn't it? So you can control the default Datasheet View in that way. So having redefined that as my default view, I can of course change it locally in any particular situation. So let's suppose that I decide that I don't like the Calibri font. On the Home tab I have this text formatting group at the right hand end, and I can use that to change fonts. So for instance, I could go to Britannic bold font, and I could say decide that I don't like italic, but I do like underline and so on. So I can make local changes, but of course when I open any other table I'll get my new default formatting when I open that table. When it comes to changing the formatting like this, you may well need to change column widths. One way of course is just to drag headers to make enough space. Another way of course, if you right click on a column header, you can go into field width and you can adjust the field width either by typing in a number or by selecting standard width, or of course going for best fit. With row height, you cannot have different row heights for different rows. If you adjust the row height, say by dragging, that same row height will be assigned to all of the rows in your table. And the other thing to remind you of is that some of the text formatting settings apply to specific selections and some of them will apply to the whole data sheet. So for example, if I were to undo bold with that column ship via selected, look what happens. The bold is undone everywhere. But if I select center for alignment with ship via selected, the centering is only on that column. By default in Datasheet View you will see the columns, the fields, in the same order that they are in the table. But in fact the order can be changed. You may well have changed the order in Datasheet View before, and there are a number of reasons for doing this. One of them is that in some situations having the fields in a different order may make maintenance easier. It may actually put all the information you want to see together, and it can be useful to do things like sorting, as we'll see in just a moment. To change the order of the columns, let's say I want to put ship via earlier in the sequence, click to select it once, click again, you notice how the left border is now highlighted, and I can drag it into the position indicated by that left border. When I release the mouse button, that's where that column goes. You can select more than one column, so if I were to click on ship name and drag right for those 3 columns, release, click again on the leftmost one of those, drag to the left, note I've got ship name, ship address and ship city, and I now drop them where the highlighted line is, and all 3 of those have now moved to that new location. So, given that you're going to do some maintenance work within a datasheet, what are some of the other options that can help you? Well, one of them is, rather than reordering all of the fields so that you can see the ones you want, you can hide some fields. So if you weren't interested particularly in those shipping fields that we just moved, you could select them, right click and click on hide fields. They're now hidden. At any other stage on any of the columns, if you click on unhide fields, you can see that the fields that are hidden are unchecked in this list of columns here. So all you need to do is to check the ones you now want to see, uncheck others as well, of course, if you want to. Click on close, and now you are only seeing the fields that aren't hidden. Something else that can be really annoying when you're using Datasheet View for maintenance is as you scroll from left and right, fields that you need in order to identify a particular record are basically scrolling off of the side of the screen. Well, as with Excel, you can freeze fields as well. So if I selected, say, the order ID and the employee, right click, freeze fields. Now watch what happens as I scroll from side to side. They are kept in view, and of course it's absolutely straightforward to unfreeze them again. Let's look next at sorting in Datasheet View. Supposing I want to sort on ship name, if I select that field, on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group, I have a Quick Sort Ascending button, which obviously does those strictly in alphabetical order, and then I'll have a quick sort for descending, and if I click on remove sort, then I'm back to sorting on primary key again. If you right click, you get the same options, or at least you appear to get the same options. You've got a quick sort A to Z, Z to A, but the caption that you get there actually depends on the field type. So if I right click on this shipping fee one, I get smallest to largest and largest to smallest because it's a numeric field, and then I get oldest to newest and newest to oldest on a date field. Now you don't always want to sort just on one field. Sometimes you want to do a sort on multiple fields. To do that in Datasheet View in Access 2013, what you need to do is to put the fields that you want to sort on together in order left to right. The one on the left is the first sort key, and the one next to that is the second sort key, and so on. So in this case, if we wanted to sort on ship via and then ship city, what we would do is to get ship via on the left, so just drag that over, and then select both fields. Ship via is already selected, so let me now select ship city, and then do an ascending sort. Watch what happens. Of course, the records with nothing in the ship via come first, then all the A's, and then for the A's I've got 4 for Chicago, 2 for New York, 2 for Salt Lake City, and so on. And again, when I finish with that, all I need to do is click on remove sort to put things back the way that they were. You could basically do as many fields as you like, just arrange them to be next to each other and in the right key sequence for your sort. We're going to look next at filters in Datasheet View. Filters can be very important in Datasheet View because if you've got a very large number of records and you need to either view some records or do some maintenance, you may need to filter the very large number in order to identify the records that you want to work on. Now, straightforward filters I'll assume you're familiar with, so you can click on the drop down at the top of a column, and I'll assume you're familiar, as I say, with the mechanisms for applying these filters. We're going to look at one or two slightly different things now. Just before we do, another couple of basic things though. At the bottom on the status bar there is a filter button that indicates whether there is currently a filter applied. This currently says no filter. Not only is this an indicator of whether a filter is applied, but you can also use it to toggle filters on and off, as I'll show you in just a moment. Now let's start by doing a straightforward filter by selection. Let's suppose I want to find all of the records where the ship name is Christina Lee. Now of course I could use the conventional filter and just check Christina Lee, but if I click in the Christina Lee entry here and then use the selection button in the sort and filter group, by default it says equals Christina Lee, does not equal Christina Lee, contains it, does not contain it, and that is a filter by selection. If I then say equals Christina Lee, it'll work pretty much the same as any regular filter. If I want to remove the filter, I just say clear filter from ship name and it's gone. Now let's suppose I want to find all of the records that where the ship via is shipping company B. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing again. Click on selection. I'm looking for shipping company B. If instead of removing that filter I click on that filtered button at the bottom, it appears the filter's been removed, but in fact all that's happened is it's been switched off. And if I click that button again, the last filter is reapplied. So that can be a very useful way if you're particularly working on a set of records with a particular filter, of just switching it on and off, toggling it on and off while you're working in Datasheet View. Now of course filters are additive in Datasheet View, so if with shipping companies B filter on ship via still enabled, I wanted to put a ship name filter on as well, say Su Yung Lee, go into selection equals Su Yung Lee, I get the records for which the ship name is Su Yung Lee and the ship via is shipping company B. Over any of the columns where I have a filter, if I hover over the filter symbol, I'll actually get a screen tip that tells me what the applied filter is. Now notice there that there are 4 records that satisfy those 2 criteria at the same time. I'm just going to remove that filter and I'm going to remove that filter. Now I've got no filters applied at all. Another option is filter by form. If I click on advanced, the drop down next to it gives me the option filter by form. And with filter by form, effectively you're presented with a blank record and you can choose any combination of values in these fields in this empty record to apply as a filter. But not only that, you can build up a complex filter with more than one selection. Let me show you how we do it in this case. Let's suppose first of all that I want to look for Su Yung Lee, and I put in the ship name and I go down and say Su Yung Lee. So that's my first filter. If you look at the bottom of the display there is a tab that says OR, and now I can put in an OR condition. In this case I'm going to do the ship via, and I'm going to choose shipping company B. So what I've built up is a filter that says either the ship name is Su Yung Lee or the ship via is shipping company B. If I now want to apply that filter, I click on toggle filter and it gives me all of the records that are either Su Yung Lee or shipping company B. Now that's more than 4 because there are several shipping company B records that don't have Su Yung Lee as the ship name. So that's how to build up a more complex filter. And the other option when it comes to creating complex filters is again on that drop down next to advanced. If you click on advanced filter sort, then you actually go into the query grid and you can build up a filter that is built in exactly the same way as you would build up a query in Access 2013. We'll be looking at Access queries in a lot of detail later on in the course, so I'll leave discussion of this until then. There's just one other feature of Datasheet View I'd like to look at now. There is of course quite a resemblance now between Access Datasheet View and conventional Excel spreadsheets. You have freezing columns, you have hiding, and so on. One of the things that wasn't originally in Access Datasheet View was a totals row, or a totals column for that matter. And if you take something like the table we're looking at here, there's probably some situations where, say, being able to total all of these shipping fees would actually be quite useful. Now you can easily put a total row on an Access table by going to the records group here and just toggling the totals button there. Now when you do that, let's go down to the bottom, a total row appears right at the bottom, but it's normally empty because you have to go into each individual column, each field, and define what you want the total to be. So let's suppose I want to know what the average shipping fee is. If I click in the total row under shipping fee and click on the little drop down there, one of the options is average. So the average shipping fee is $44.54. Quite a few functions you can use there. In a date column like this one, I could say what's the minimum, i.e. the earliest date. In a column like this where some of the records have values and some don't, I could actually say, well, count how many have got values. So if I click in there, I can actually say, give me a count of how many of those have got values. So the totals row, I'm afraid it's one I don't use very much myself, but to give a quick answer to a question or two, it's a pretty useful feature, I think. So that's it on Datasheet View. I hope you picked up a few good ideas from those more advanced aspects of it. That's the end of this section. I'll see you in the next one.